What do you make of negotiations so far? David Davis says that some concrete progress has been made, yet we hear from the EU there's been no decisive progress. So who do we believe?
Well, it's exactly as I've been predicting since before this process all began, with 14 months since the referendum, and nothing's happened. Of course nothing's happened, because we're going to the EU and saying, oh, please, sir, how may we leave? And they don't want us to leave. So why would they negotiate with us in a realistic or meaningful manner? We're going about it completely the wrong way. We shouldn't be asking them about how we can leave. We should leave and then explain to them how it's going to work. And then they would accept the offers that we would make, because they wouldn't have an alternative. We'd make them an offer they can't refuse. You know, there are a number of areas I can go into on this of how it would work, but our approach, the government's approach, is completely wrong. Nothing is happening. I can't see any prospect of anything happening very much, because the EU hopes that the quislings in the British Parliament will find a way of overturning this, and all they're doing is delaying the whole process for as long as possible.
And yet, is not David Davis getting some sort of support, perhaps winning the hearts and minds of the taxpayer with this much-feared divorce bill? I mean, clearly money is the main stumbling block here, after all. And quite frankly, the EU wants us to talk about this, but we want to talk about other issues.
Well, he could solve this problem very quickly by telling them the amount that we're going to pay them is a big fat zero. We don't owe them anything. The House of Lords Committee on this and the Constitutional Affairs Committee of the European Parliament have both acknowledged that legally there is no obligation to pay anything. We're leaving and our contributions will end. The most that the EU could even ask for would be the net contributions until the end of the budget period, which I worked out in July was about 33.7 billion, and that goes down every month that we remain in. I wouldn't even pay them that, but that would be the only thing that they could actually ask for if they were going to ask for something. And I think this problem needs to be solved by David Davis explaining we're not paying anything, and we go from there. And if they don't want to go from there, we leave, we go on a World Trade Organization terms. But there are lots of things that it is in their interest to solve with us, ongoing arrangements that we need to talk about. But they're not going to do it while they think there's a chance. I mean, you heard that quisling Corbett talking about how the British people are going to change their mind. They won't. In fact, if anything, they're more hardened towards this issue now than they were, because they realised that all the Remain side told were lies about how terrible it would all be when we left. And
don't you think people are getting fed up?
Well.
But Gerard, don't you think people are actually getting pretty fed up with all this Brexit business? And now we have, of course, Tony Blair having that meeting, and of course here, along with David Miliband, are voices of dissent. Do they not have support that these people want to derail the Brexit process, and the British people might well be behind them?
Who is Tony Blair? He's not elected to anything, and by going off and talking to the EU, all he's doing is obeying the instructions of his international paymasters, who, you know, he retired from being PM and suddenly is a multi-millionaire. These are the people that he represents. He doesn't represent the British public. British public are sick of him because we're living with the consequences of what his government did to us. So I don't think he represents anybody. If Mr. Juncker wants to talk to him, well, I'm surprised he would waste his time doing that. But Blair is, as I said, is fulfilling the instructions of his international paymasters, who want Britain to stay in the European Union because they want open borders, they want a common legislature in Brussels, they don't want to have to deal with democratic countries, they want open borders for cheap labour, and that's the people that Tony Blair represents. And he should be tried for treason in this country for taking us into the Iraq war on the basis of lies.